Hi, everyone. Let's continue with our discussion of population data versus sample data. So if we go back to our schematic here, maybe the population of interest is all registered voters in California. In 2019, there were about 20 million of them. But we don't have time to talk to every registered voter in California. We don't have time for a census. If we manage to collect data from each element of the population, we have a census. But the problem is that a census is often impossible or impractical. Now, actually, we are trying to conduct a census in America in the year 2020. That's mandated by the Constitution, where we try to contact every resident in the United States. That has been the source of controversy because the issue of undocumented immigrants has been a controversy with respect to the Trump administration. But often a census is impossible or impractical. So we collect data on only some elements of the population, and these elements make up a sample from the population. So for example, of the 20 million or so registered voters in California, we might take a random sample of 1,000. We'll talk more about this later. So capital N, the population size, might be about 20 million, but little n, the sample size, might be only about 1,000. In fact, 1,000 is pretty typical for a poll. That's a reasonable sample size for a poll. And we can actually talk or email all 1,000 people. Okay, so let's talk more about the idea of a census. I got this data from Wikipedia. Not generally recommended, but I think I was safe here. Example 1, a census with population data, presidents' ages. So here, I consider the 45 US presidents through Donald Trump. Cleveland is counted twice. We want to know how old they were when they became president, when they were inaugurated. So with the help of the internet, Wikipedia, we can quickly conduct a census and obtain all the necessary population data. So here I have the order number for each president. George Washington, you may remember, was number 1. The last name here, and the corresponding age on becoming president. In fact, the oldest was in fact number 45, President Trump, at age 70. If Joe Biden wins in 2020, then he would be number 46, and he would have the oldest age. Donald Trump is trying to stay number 45. Okay, so this is an example of a census where we have all of the elements of interest, all the US presidents, and their corresponding ages. The presidents would be referred to as the observational units. The ages make up the actual population data, the numbers that we might want to manipulate. Okay. Now, let's talk more about the idea of population data versus sample data. All right. So example 2, a statistical experiment using sample data, a poll. So let's say the great nation of Fredonia, it's made up. The Marx Brothers joked about this. Actually, there were joke surveys sent out to actual Congress people. What do you think of our policy towards Fredonia? And they didn't know it was a made-up country. They made fools of themselves. All right, the nation of Fredonia has 100,000 registered voters. We would like to know the proportion of registered voters in Fredonia who want to re-elect the president. So the proportion might be something like 0.5 if it's 50%, or 0.40 if it's 40%, for example. The Fredonia News Network, FNN, randomly calls 1,000 registered voters. Well, as you might suspect, you can figure out which is capital N and which is little n. But FNN randomly calls 1,000 registered voters in Fredonia and asks them their opinion about re-electing the president. 570 of them, or 57%, say that they support the re-election of the president. So take a moment now and try to answer these 6 questions. A, what is the population of interest in this experiment? B, what is the population size, capital N? C, what is the sample in this experiment? D, what is the sample size, little n? E, describe the sample results. And F, based on the sample results, what might we infer about the population? I'll give you a minute to look this over. All right. So first of all, what is the population of interest in this experiment? It's all registered voters in Fredonia. Those are the elements we actually care about, all registered voters in Fredonia. What is the population size, capital N? Well, there are 100,000 registered voters in Fredonia. So capital N is 100,000. If you want units, voters maybe. C, what is the sample in this experiment? The sample consists of the registered voters in Fredonia who are called by FNN, the Fredonia News Network. So they're in the poll. The sample size, little n, is 1,000 voters. That's the sample size in our poll, or FNN's poll. E, describe the sample results. Well, 570 of the 1,000 called voters, or 57% of them, say that they support the re-election of the president. So the sample proportion is 0.57. F, based on the sample results, what might we infer about the population? Well, based on the poll, we might infer that about 57% of all the registered voters in Fredonia support the re-election of the president. But when I say about 57%, can we make that a bit more precise? We're going to talk about that more when we talk about inferential statistics later in the course. Okay, population data versus sample data. In lesson 2, we're going to ask, well, how do we pick them? How do we come up with a sample? How do we get from here over to here? How do we get our sample? Sampling methods. How do we pick them? All right, that's next time.